I'm glad that legislators seem to be feeling the urgency to fix our system. I'm here today because those most directly impacted by the failures of our criminal justice system can't speak out. They don't have the option of a work stoppage. They can't walk out. They've been locked away, often out of sight and out of mind. Oklahoma has failed them, and as our incarceration rate continues to grow, we continue to fail future generations of Oklahomans. We are here today because after being promised again and again that this would be the session of meaningful criminal justice reform, the best we seem to be able to do is watered down versions of already compromised bills, created by the prosecutors who benefit most from the failed system and political leaders looking to say they've accomplished change while being unable to tell us what the impact of these bills will be. We hope that the spirit we saw in the House last night, one that embraced the need for bipartisan solutions, is one that will carry over as we address the most urgent problem facing our state.
It seems that the system we have today has punishment as its currency, the willful and deliberate infliction of suffering. And at the same time, the hope of the system is to reform or rehabilitate people. We ask the question, are those incompatible goals? Is it a contradiction to expect meaningful change from the infliction of pain? And the system itself is in many ways dependent on poor people to pay for its operation. Better goals are accountability, restitution, compensation, restoration, and reconciliation. So specifically, what about the reform issues do we think would be compatible with our biblical theological perspectives? Number one, to reduce the reliance on fines and fees for operation of the system. Those kinds of burdens rob people of hope, and hope is very important in bringing about changed lives. Understanding that a pain-based system, one that isolates people in prisons, is socially, economically, and relationally disabling, and not to rely on that unless absolutely necessary, which means getting rid of mandatory minimums, reducing sentences for nonviolent offenses, and finally, understanding that addiction is a public health issue instead of a criminal justice issue, and relying more and more on treatment, alternative courts such as drug courts.
So what I do now and what I've dedicated my life to is criminal justice reform. So in my time with the Smart Justice Campaign, we've been tackling things like prosecutorial reform, sentencing reform, bail reform, reentry programs, and it's key to realize and to add in those voices, right? So many times we talk about people from the outside looking in, but it's so important to get people on the inside of the system to talk about what's best for them and what they need. And that's the work that we're trying to do right now. So this is just a little snippet of my story, but this is the story of thousands of Oklahomans, right? And so a key point in trying to include people in these stories and include people in this work is creating self-sustaining organizing communities. And a way that we're doing that now is conducting community conversations. Our next community conversation is this evening at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Open Arms.
So we saw a really great bill at the start of the session, Senate Bill 969, from Senator Roger Thompson, that would have taken 780 and allowed folks to apply for retroactive sentence modifications. It could have meant as more than 800 folks currently incarcerated being able to get out of our prisons and jails. It would have meant more than $9 million added back into the budget. It would also have allowed an unmeasurable number of Oklahomans who live with felony records to apply to have those changed so that they can get housing and jobs without that, hanging around their necks. It unfortunately did not make it out of committee, but we're still hopeful as we kind of come up upon these final deadlines that people look at the bills that are still alive and take the opportunity to add in some language that is really going to make reforms meaningful.